Tainted Grail: The Fall of Avalon is a brand new indie RPG by Awaken Realms Questline team, which is a 50-person studio based out of Poland. It's been in early access since March 30th, 2023 and sold 160,000 early access copies on Steam. The game is coming into 1.0 full release on May 23rd, 2025 and is going to be estimated at 50 to 70 hours long. The devs were kind enough to give me review access as well as the collector's edition of the game, and I've played the game for about 20 hours now, but I do want to stress that I also played the game pretty much immediately after it had come out, all the way to its completion at the time, so I've seen the game at its earliest iteration and now at its 1.0, so I feel like I've seen enough of it to give a proper impression of the game, but keep in mind I've only played about a third of it so far. Anyway, jumping into the story is essentially that a long time ago in a place called the Homelands, there was something known as the Red Death that was killing people left and right. King Arthur led his people out of the Homelands and into Avalon, which is a place occupied by basically a primordial peoples, and with the assistance of Merlin and these things called the menhirs, they were able to drive out the weirdness, which is sort of like a primordial magical fog that the primordial peoples used to their advantage and that would cause like strange mutations and stuff, out of the area, and were able to conquer Avalon and set up a place for humanity to thrive known as Camelot, or the kingdom of King Arthur. And then suddenly, after Arthur's conquest was complete, he died and the Red Death returned, and these people known as the Red Priests have spent the last few centuries trying to find a cure for it in a place called the Island Asylum. You are one such person who is at this Island Asylum having the Red Death and are presumably going to spend the rest of your days being experimented on and suffering horribly. That is until a man named Caradoc frees you, and you discover along the way that there was an experiment done to you to fuse Arthur's soul to you, or at least a piece of it, in an effort to bring him back to life, to hopefully right the wrongs of the world as it is right now. Later on in the introduction, you learned that Caradoc wants the opposite of this. He wants to get rid of Arthur once and for all, to destroy the pieces of his soul, and to forge a new future for humanity without Arthur, without his influence, and without the society that he's essentially allowed to perpetrate, because he's been brought back more than once. The dual plotline is a pretty cool mechanic. I actually quite like it, and it takes about an hour or two for the introduction to get through, so you're not really playing it for too long, and it doesn't have too much exposition or fluff. I would say that the intro has way more story context than it did from the beta when I played it for the first time, and it's really good. I actually quite liked it. The voice acting is phenomenal. The narrator and Arthur in particular are really well done.
We thought we'd escaped it, but the Red Death returned like a spectre to haunt us.
Then the deep stirred. A shudder ran through the vessel from neither wind nor tide, but from something far below.
As far as the setting goes, Tainted Grail is a tabletop setting, and it's a really cool, unique blend of obviously the King Arthur mythos with like a dark fantasy, almost H.R. Geiger. If you're familiar with his work, he did some stuff on Alien. He did a bunch of stuff. He's a prolific science fiction artist. There's also very obvious Polish folklore mixed into it, so it has sort of the Witcher elements, at least as far as the creatures that you'll run into. They feel very familiar if you're familiar with that game. A lot of people have mentioned that this is like the Polish Skyrim, which I guess I can see. It shares a lot of the same mechanics like combat, lockpicking, crafting, things like that. However, it reminded me personally more of something like Gothic, or like the hybridization of the two, which I think is the most apt comparison would be like Enderal, which is a mod for Skyrim if you've ever played it, which essentially is like a new Gothic game. It's a lot closer to Gothic than it is to Skyrim. It has similar story beats. It has more set enemies throughout the world, more set items throughout the world like Gothic did. There's a lot more incentive to explore. And it's just in general a really fun and interesting setting that I found unique and has definitely driven me forward. I don't want to spoil too much of the story. Basically, you're seeking out different shards of King Arthur's soul, and you can decide to either destroy them or to give them to Arthur so that he can become more whole. And he'll give you various powers along the way. It's as simple and as robust as that. You'll meet members of the Round Table who are, not necessarily great, and you'll also meet various people who have one reason or another to either like or dislike Arthur and Camelot. Jumping into the gameplay now, I want to start with the combat, which feels a lot smoother than when I played it in the beta. You have, your standard, you have melee, you have range, you have, sneaking, daggers, you have magic. I ended up doing a dual Spellblade build, at least initially, because I kind of wanted to do both. The combat is very fast-paced and dangerous, which I think is fun. Enemies can kill you really quickly, but you can also kill enemies really quickly, at least on the default setting, which I think is great. The game does stutter a bit during combat, especially if you're using magic or fighting multiple enemies, but it's not too egregious. There is some general wonkiness too. Enemies do kind of float towards you, which is just a byproduct of them kind of just locking onto you. It's not terrible, and there's a lot of cool, unique enemy designs that I loved a lot. Tons of different weapons and armor for you to try it and pick up from them too. Combat in general, though, I think is a highlight of the game. I was honestly seeking it out more often than not. It feels visceral, it feels heavy, it has weight. I really enjoy it. In comparison to something like Skyrim, I think it's a lot more compelling, to be honest. Jumping into the leveling system, I did find the leveling system to be a little bit cumbersome only because of how broad it is. There's a lot of room for variety here, but with how little points you get per level, which is like 1 attribute and 1 skill point, and items having fairly high requirements for attributes themselves, it kind of made it feel like you couldn't multi-class or that you weren't supposed to, because I did start the game as a Spellblade, but I felt like I was sort of limited or that I wasn't supposed to do this. And so I ended up about halfway through my run, or at least, the introduction of this run, I ended up going full mage, which has been a lot of fun. I'm a lot squishier than I would like to be, but I love the different spells that you get, the various destructive power of them, or like the healing power of them, or even just like the ability to summon things. It's all really fun, and I highly recommend it if you like magic to give it a go. And then to level up in general, you actually have to use a bonfire, which is a mechanic that you get shortly after the introduction. It also lets you do things like alchemy and cooking, which you can also do at various workbenches. There's a lot of crafting in this game, like a ton, and I'm gonna talk about that in a second. You can also talk to Arthur at the bonfires. You can level up your bonfire with these elements that you get from fighting weirdness infected enemies. Again, the weirdness is like that primordial magical fog. These come out at night. There'll be like a yellow circle around you, so you'll know that it's happening. And you can use these to identify items. You can use these to upgrade your campfire so that you can fast travel. You can use these to restore your ability just at a normal campfire, like you get a special power from Arthur for getting various parts of his soul. You can also rest or sleep, blah, blah, blah. It's a bonfire. It does a lot of things, kind of like the one in Dark Souls does. Overall, I find the leveling and the combat to be serviceable. The combat is a lot more fun than the leveling. I did, again, feel like the leveling was kind of restrictive only because I wanted to do a little bit more with it. I tend to prefer multi-classing, and I wasn't able to do that. It's not necessarily game-breaking or anything, and it's not going to change my opinion dramatically, but it's something to keep in mind if that's like the kind of character that you like. I would say try a bunch of different things out. You can be a sneaky archer. There's a lot of armor that I found that was for that. I, again, just went mage, so I ended up just like rolling with that and going into that as much as I could. Since I mentioned it already, I want to briefly talk about the crafting. The systems are fine. They're whatever. You find recipes, you make stuff. It works exactly like it does in Skyrim or in Gothic, where you have to like learn recipes to make new ones, or you can just experiment and find them that way. But because there's so many different systems, because the game is really trying to be this broad RPG, which it does well at some parts, I think it kind of drops the ball in the crafting systems just because there's too many of them and the inventory tends to feel really bloated. There's just a ton of items. There's almost too much to pick up, honestly, and you can kind of get overwhelmed. I felt like The Witcher had this problem too, where there was just like too much to do with alchemy, and so there was constantly like items, which is why they're not physical objects on the ground, probably because there's just so much. It has the same problem here. There's just a lot of items. It's not necessarily a problem, but if you're a loot goblin like me, you want to pick those up, but you probably shouldn't because you don't need all of them. And then also just selling stuff isn't that profitable. It's better to just do quests and like bounties and stuff. And now that we're going to transition straight into quests, I did love how unique and unexpected a lot of them were. So there was various ways to solve them. Like one of them, for example, there's a necromancer raising the undead in a crypt nearby. It's one of the first quests you'll get when you come to the Horns of the South, which is the first area proper in the game. Yes, there are multiple. Basically, there is a necromancer who's trying to break the cycle of life, and you can convince him to become undead to see if he's able to figure it out himself after he has died, and he ends up just becoming a zombie, basically. And this guy, this keeper of the graveyard, is like, well, I guess I'll watch after him now. Thanks for solving that problem. And it's really funny. It's really unique. There's a ton of different stuff like this. Like there's a quest where you have to do a ritual at a druid circle, and the ghosts of the druids basically just make fun of you for even doing the ritual, which I think is really tongue-in-cheek and it's just fun. And there's also other like various, go here, slay giant enemy or evil enemy, bandit, whatever, and then you get a reward. So if you like both of those things, there's a lot of different variety. They're not always just go here, do X, come back. They are surprising. They're unique. I did find though that too many of the NPCs, in my opinion, have quests, or they just have too much exposition in general. Especially when you get to the first town, you're going to be there for hours just because everybody has something to say, even if they don't know who the hell you are, which is kind of something that I don't love. I would have preferred if you did a couple favors for some people around town, and then other ones were like, hey, I heard you helped my friend, can you help me, blah blah blah. I think that would have been a little more compelling versus every random person in this town coming up to me and being like, hey, I've never seen you before, can you do this for me? Which I guess makes sense, but I just felt like it was a really overwhelming from a player standpoint to go from having like 2 quests to 20 quests. It's just a lot. But the game does incentivize you to also find these quests on your own. You don't have to necessarily get them from the NPCs themselves. Exploration is huge in this, which is why I'm reminded more of Gothic than I am of Skyrim, which Skyrim has that too, but Gothic had a very unique feeling of exploration and danger and sort of like risk and reward that this captures really well. I'm not surprised considering this is a Polish team and it was a really popular game there, but I I had that feeling while playing this that they were fans of it, because it just has that rich exploration where quests can be sort of done out of order, or you can just find stuff in a cave and be like, oh, you've completed the quest already because you've already found the thing that I'm asking you for, or you already killed the person that I'm asking for, or you've already, blah, blah, blah. You've done the ritual that I wanted you to do. Anything. It's cool that you're able to do things out of order, and it's cool that exploration is so heavily encouraged, because there's almost always something to see, almost always something to find and something to do. And they're not just like randomly generated items. They'll be like actual tangible build items that you can find in set locations, which I think is really, really great. I love that personally, because then it means on future runs you can beeline to those places and just set yourself up for that run, for that character basically. But with the story, combat, quests, exploration, things like that out of the way, which I find very, very good. I think that those are the parts of the game that excel for the most part. It's an indie RPG. Sometimes it will stumble, but overall I have a very positive experience of this, and I want to stress that they did not ask me to say these things. I'm merely telling you it because I was playing it, binging it really over the last couple days, and I was telling myself, like, this is really, really good actually. I'm having a ton of fun, and even with something like the Oblivion remaster coming out recently, I'm still coming to this instead, and I will still come back to this to finish at least my run up, because it's just a ton of fun. I think it's great. Let's jump to some of the more miscellaneous stuff and some of the other issues that I had, and then we'll wrap up the video. The sound is good. The music, I think, fits the setting pretty well. It's kind of loud by default, but you can turn that down. That's like a minor issue. You can fix it. There's a bunch of different settings that you can tweak as well, which is great. I think that people need more accessibility settings. Just in general, I didn't have very much performance issues. I did mention that there's some stuttering, but really, it runs pretty well. I only had one crash in 20 hours, and this isn't even the real full release. They're still patching it right now at the time of me recording this. So, I don't know. I think that it runs really well. I think that the world itself is really compelling. The story might not be terribly interesting, but the setting I found was enough to keep me going, and I want to see more. Plus, the exploration and the combat alone are a ton of fun, and I'm very much looking forward to finishing this up and just seeing where it takes me, because I want to see what other magical abilities I can get. Because of the magic, it feels punchy, it feels weighty, especially when you throw like a fireball at somebody and they blow up and they fly halfway across the map. It's viscerally satisfying. I love it. I want to thank the developers for giving me access to this early. I know that's a lot of faith to put in somebody, especially with no incentive for me to say anything positive about it. I was fully prepared to poo-poo on it because I had played the beta years ago, and I did have a lot of issues with it, so I was a little bit hesitant to make something like this. But I'm honestly, personally very relieved that it turned out as well as it did, and I wish them nothing but the best. And I highly encourage you that if you want or are looking for a new indie RPG to try, and you've never tried Tainted Grail or Fall of Avalon, go pick it up. It's coming out tomorrow, full release. It is $45.99 on Steam for the standard edition, and I think it's very much worth it. I think that you'll enjoy it, especially if you want something unique as far as an RPG goes. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope this video was helpful to you if you're interested in picking the game up. As always, I'm Soul. This has been Tainted Grail, the Fall of Avalon, and I will happily see you in the next one.